Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call to order the June 4th, 2026 Contra Costa Transportation Authority Planning Committee meeting. And I'm going to turn this over to Terry Ann, and if you would please roll this short video, and we'll all give our attention to it, please.
This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Public speakers will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The chair will call upon public speakers at the appropriate time. Each public speaker is requested to state their name and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Public speakers who wish to speak in person should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Public speakers participating by Zoom who are wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of any written correspondence would like to speak during the meeting, they should raise their hand or submit a public speaker card. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you very much. The next item on our, excuse me, we have to take roll. We know we're here, but we need to make it official. Terry Ann, would you please do the roll call?
Commissioner Armstrong?
Here.
Commissioner Carlson?
Here.
Commissioner Xavier?
Here.
Vice Chair Meadows?
Here.
Chair Obringer?
I'm here as well.
Okay, all members are present.
Thank you. Our next item is the public comment, and so this is the opportunity for members of the public to address the committee on items that are not on the agenda. So is there anyone here in the room who would like to make public comment? General public comment? No. Is there anyone online, Terry Ann?
We've received no public comment, written or verbal.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close the public comment then. Our next item is our consent calendar. And so we've got a few items there. So was there anything any of our committee members would like to pull from the consent calendar? Nope. All right, is there anyone from the public who would like to make public comment on consent calendar?
We have not received any public comment, written or verbal.
Thank you. And I don't see anybody getting up here in the room. All right, so is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. Okay, so a motion by Commissioner Armstrong, a second by Commissioner Xavier. Could you please call the vote, Terry Ann?
Commissioner Armstrong?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier?
Aye.
Vice Chair Meadows?
Yes.
Chair Obringer?
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you. Moving on to our regular agenda items, the first regular agenda item is an action item. We see that Matt Kelly is presenting. He's already in position. He's going to discuss the proposed coordinated call for projects program guidelines.
Thank you, Chair Obringer. Good afternoon, Planning Committee members. Matt Kelly, Director of Planning at CCTA. Glad to be here today to talk to you about our proposed, we need a camera, don't we? Thank you, Terry Ann. Our proposed coordinated call for projects. We're calling it the CCFP for short, because it is a mouthful. Let me get into the slides here. So we are calling it a coordinated call for projects because there are several grant funding sources currently available. In order to make things easier on our local project sponsors, we decided to coordinate this effort into a unified call for projects. And I'll just describe the various funding sources that are going into this. And you may remember we came to you back in March kind of with a initial proposal, but it's been fully fleshed out over the last few months. So just a reminder, out of the Plan Bay Area RTP, there is a new cycle each time of One Bay Area grants. This is the fourth cycle. OBAG is, the goal is to collaboratively implement Plan Bay Area and its priorities for transportation, housing, and the environment. The goal of this funding program is to fund projects both locally and regionally to improve connectivity, equity, and sustainability. This cycle incorporates the new transit-oriented communities policy and the transit priority policy for roadways into the funding cycle. These are all federal funds that come through MTC, so a local match is required, the 11.47 standard federal match amount. The MTC has asked the CTAs, of which CCTA is the Countywide Transportation Authority for Contra Costa County, to administer the county programs. All project sponsors must meet OBAG compliance requirements, which I'll describe in just a moment. 80% of all projects that we fund through our county program must be within a mile of the TOC, the transit-oriented community sites, such as the BART station across the street. All of our BART stations are TOCs, as well as the Amtrak station in Martinez and the ferry terminal in Richmond. And then all of our PDA geographies, which are located in most of our jurisdictions around the county. And then all project submittals are due to MTC from CCTA at the end of October. So there is about $43.4 million available for Contra Costa County according to our formulaic target. MTC has made about $4.9 million available for our base planning funds. Those are funds not just for planning, for the planning department, but for all of our CMA functions over the next 4 years. So that kind of comes off the top of our county portion. We will be submitting a total project list of $52.1 million, which is 120% of that $43 million target, as MTC, based on the applications they receive from all the counties, they may have the capacity to fund over 100% of our project list. So those requirements of the project applicants that I mentioned, so at the jurisdictional level, all jurisdictions must be in compliance with HCD and have their housing elements certified, be submitting their annual housing reports. On the safety side, they must have a local road safety plan adopted within the last 5 years. They must be participating in their pavement management certification. This is all about pavement condition index and surveying your needs and reporting that back to MTC, as well as performance reporting. This is just submitting traffic counts for the feds to MTC, which they request every year. A few of our jurisdictions had been out of compliance as of March, but we've been working with MTC and with the local agencies to get them back into compliance. So we will continue to work on that, as we intend for all jurisdictions to be receiving funding from OBAG 4. So we need everyone to be in compliance. Here's a map showing where our projects must be sited, at least 80% of them. So the pink or purplish color is the transit-oriented communities, like I mentioned, across the street. The priority development areas are in green. And then a mile buffer around those two geographies is the red. So you can see there's pretty good coverage around most of our kind of built-up urban areas. Some gaps, say in Alamo, parts of San Ramon, Pacheco, and in Far East County. But we believe with that 80-20 ratio, we won't have a problem meeting that threshold. Just for your information, in 2022 with OBAG 3, the requirement was 70%, and we were right around 80% there. So we aren't too concerned about that, and we still have the ability to cite projects, outside of the red areas, at least 20% of our projects. So on the local side, these are our Measure J babies. These are our flexible local funds that the project sponsors covet because these are local funds without all the strings of the federal funds. So 5% of the measure goes to Program 12, which is Transportation for Livable Communities. These are funds that really go to promote alternatives to the single occupant vehicle, funding bike ped improvements, streetscape improvements, transit access, traffic calming measures, et cetera. There's about $33 million available for this cycle, the third cycle of TLC and PBTF. It is competitive at the sub-regional level, so the RTPCs determine their priorities and submit those to CCTA. The allocations are subject to compliance with the growth management program, so you must be in compliance with the GMP. And then I note previous funding decisions. So about 10 years ago, when we were working on funding the EBART extension, East County and Transplan decided to forego a couple of cycles of TLC and direct that funding to the EBART project. So for this cycle of TLC, there is no funding available for the East County jurisdictions. So just wanted to note that up front. Program 25 of the measure is an additional carve out for TLC that goes directly to West County. And then, and as I mentioned before, these are local funds and don't have the federal requirements, including the local match. Measure J Program 13, 1.5% of the measure goes to pedestrian, bicycle, and trail facilities. These funds are generally used for construction of our regional trails and other important bike and ped facilities. There's about $12 million available. Once again, this is countywide, competitive countywide, but the prioritization of the projects is done at our Bike and Ped Advisory Committee. However, West County also on the PBTF receives an additional allocation through Program 26, and WICTAC actually determines where that share goes. So a little bit of PBTF is done outside of the CBPAC. East Bay Regional Parks get 0.5% of the measure, so a third of Program 13 goes directly to East Bay Parks. They allocate their funding to a single project in a single RTPC annually. So over the 4-year cycle, they will come to each RTPC with a project that they propose to fund, and that requires the concurrence of the RTPC. And that this year's project just went through Transplan. Once again, local funds. So here's a breakdown by subregion. You can see that West County has about 14.4 million in TLC, and that includes 5.6 in their Program 25 additional funds. Central gets about 11 million, Southwest 7.6. On the PBTF side, there's about 8.4 competitive across the county, including East County. East Bay Parks share is about 3.5 million. As I mentioned earlier, they get to determine that with RTPC concurrence. So there's a couple of other kind of unique funding sources that we're including in the coordinated call. That includes MTC's CARE program. These are REAP funds that are intended to fund projects from our community-based transportation plans that you'll hear about on our next item. This fund source replaces the Lifeline Transportation Program. There's about a little over $3 million available for Contra Costa County in the form of technical assistance and participatory budgeting categories to advance our projects. This is funded through OBAG 4. The schedule is consistent with OBAG 4. And basically, projects that appear in our community-based transportation plan will be deemed eligible. And then the Air District is making a new fund source available, some transportation for clean air funds. They're calling it additional bikeway funding. So $3.3 million is available for Contra Costa County for bicycle infrastructure projects that meet TFCA's cost effectiveness. So we will be running select projects or we'll be accepting projects that have been run through TFCA's cost effectiveness calculator, and that includes projects that have come through as part of our 40% call for projects that just occurred over the last month or so. Projects that don't get funded through that, we will consider for this. So here's an overall look at the funding through this coordinated call. All in all, it's $95 million, almost on the dot. This is much more than we've ever made available at one time, so we're really excited to put this much money out on the streets at once, or at least over the course of the four-year cycle.
Hey, Matt, just really quick,
Yeah.
just sort of a history for the committee here, because I know we got a lot of new board members, but the reason why there's so much TLC PBTF funds is that we usually do this tandem with OBAG, right? So you had OBAG 2, OBAG 3, OBAG 4, and usually that gets done in conjunction with the reauthorization of the federal funds, right? The federal formula funds. And so OBAG 3 was basically funded by the IIJA, right? And so this upcoming call will be funded by whatever transportation reauthorization the federal government passes in the next year or so, because they won't do it by October. But on TLC PBTF, the last time we actually did a call for projects was back in 2018 with OBAG 2. And the reason why we did that was because you may recall the board approved in our strategic plan to basically withhold the call for projects, or hold on to the call for projects for TLC PBTF to basically get through the pinch point in our debt service over the last like 6 years. So we went through, and so we wanted to make sure we had a really strong, healthy cash flow over the last 6 years to be able to make those maximum debt payments given potential, changes and fluctuations in the economy. And so that was one of the reasons why we want to do is make sure we were just being really conservative. And so that's why there's so much money available in TLC PBTF. So there has not been a call for projects from TLC PBTF since 2018. So I just want to make sure you all get that history and kind of background. And so, and we typically, the way we do things is we do a call in alignment with every 4 years with this federal fund source that we always get through MTC. But again, we skipped it in 2022. And so now we're here with 2027, 2028, basically.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
So I thought I heard you say that federal funding hasn't been reauthorized, and I know that, we're California, so are we going to get the OBAG 4 money? Like, is it, because that's what I'm just wondering.
So
Like,
that's part of MTC's role. So MTC, they're the ones that are going to be so MTC ultimately gets to choose the projects. So they basically go out to all the 9 Berry counties. All the 9 Berry counties are doing this call for projects, and they're not going to program these funds unless the funds are available. But they're going through this massive process because this process will take probably two years to do, because you're trying to do this. It's not just Contra Costa County. There's a coordinated call for projects, if you will, across the entire Bay Area right now with all 9 Berry counties. And so they're trying to collect all these projects across the 9 Berry counties. And so that process takes, probably close to 2 years to do.
Got it, okay.
And so they will not program these funds until they know the funds will be coming somewhat
But
in
they're
the door.
preparing as though they are
We're
coming.
preparing
Okay,
as if
thank
we
you.
are getting the funds.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the first year of the OBAG funds is 26, 27, fiscal year 26, 27. So we'll
Did
know.
anybody else have any questions since we're at this stopping point here? No?
And also want to note that we do intend to have one more TLC PPTF cycle under Measure J, so between now and 2034. But we'll get to that in a few years. Just to summarize the proposed coordinated call for projects, the process anyway, there will be a single application for each project, whether they're seeking funding through OBAG 4 county program, the CARE program, TLC, PBTF, or the TFCA additional funding. There is a maximum application of 2 project applications per jurisdiction. That includes our bus operators and special districts. We are allowing or proposing 4 applications from the county and BART, as long as they're, not doubling up in any one subregion, that they're spreading it out across their areas and across the subregions. Minimum grant size, $500,000, that's an OBAG rule. And then $250,000 for CARE, TLC, and PBTF. And that's to allow for more kind of quick build type projects, flexibility from the local sponsors. So really, this is summarizing kind of what I've already talked about. Really, we built off of the criteria we established in OBAG 3, which was in 2022, and the last cycle of TLC PBTF, because we really vetted some good program criteria through those 2 processes, and then incorporating changes from OBAG 4. So the process was that the TCC, provided input on the development of the coordinated call for projects. They will be screening the applications that come in, and they will be responsible for kind of the scoring of those OBAG 4 projects. So when CCTA issues the call for projects, the proposal is that all the applications come in at the same time, but starting then, there is a separate schedule for scoring and approval of the federal programs versus the Measure J, TLC, PBTF, and that is because of MTC's October deadline. So we, because the TLC projects go through the RTPCs, will allow them a little more time before we adopt those final lists. So as I mentioned, the RTPCs do that TLC scoring, the CBPAC does the PBTF scoring. We would run those select bike projects through the TFCA cost effectiveness calculator and direct projects from CBTPs through the CARE funding program. And that we would submit the OBAG 4 projects to MTC in October. Just wanted to show you what the criteria generally looks like. So we have 12 criteria that focus on the goals of both OBAG and TLC PBTF. I can go through these if you'd like, but basically we've used feedback we've heard from all of our committees to determine the weights of the criteria. So those weights have been adjusted since last cycle, but the criteria remain the same. For the TLC scoring at the RTPCs, they will be given the opportunity to adjust the weighting. This is the weighting for OBAG 4 projects, but like I said, TLC and PBTF can be, the weights can be adjusted by their scoring committees.
Really, sorry, Matt, just try to chime in one more time. Sorry, I think on the scoring, I think it's really important everyone understand kind of the process, because MTC ultimately gets to select the projects. I think it's really important for everyone to understand that. So what we're trying to accomplish at CCTA is to make sure that we're putting forward like the best projects, so that way we meet our target. So when we did OBAG 3, we were very successful. We actually we were like one of 2 counties that actually exceeded our target by like just about 1 or 2%, and so I think that what we want to do is make sure that whatever projects we're putting forward like align really well with MTC and regional goals, and so that way they're selecting, and getting to our full target, our county target share. So that's why that scoring is really important, because we need to make sure that the scoring that we're putting forth will align also with this is a really good example of like balancing like regional priorities with local priorities, and really making sure that we have the right scoring system to achieve goals local and regionally to maximize our target share.
Thanks, Tim. And I've got a slide that digs into the scoring in just a second. So our proposal for the OBAG 4 funds, the federal funds, we've incorporated the new OBAG 4 requirements. We're asking that, or we're requiring that all project sponsors, including CCTA, where applicable, meet the eligibility requirements. Basically, if we're delivering a project on behalf of a local agency, then we need to meet those local jurisdictional requirements. So, as Tim just said, we were very successful with our approach in OBAG 3. We'd like to continue that approach with OBAG 4 and continue to focus on countywide programs that benefit all jurisdictions. And so, building off of the success of the Phase 1 of the countywide Smart Signals program, which you heard about is already, going to construction. We've proposed a Phase 2 of that project, which I'll describe in just a moment. We're also proposing a continuation from OBAG 3 with our Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure funding. So both those programs carry over from OBAG 3. We are proposing adding a countywide TDM program category, a countywide student transportation program category, and a category for updating our electric vehicle readiness blueprint. And I'll get into those a little more in just a moment. We are also proposing including some competitive funds in the OBAG 4 county program, including transit funds for system improvements and state of good repair investments, as well as what we call ATS, Active Transportation and Safety Program. That was a competitive program in OBAG 3 that we're also proposing continue to OBAG 4. And so those last two programs would be competitive amongst the transit providers and the local project sponsors, respectively. So for the five categories in blue, we are proposing that CCTA will submit a single application for each on behalf of and in coordination with each agency sponsor. We're currently reaching out to sponsors, especially on the Smart Signals side, to get their input on our application. And then, based on what our applications look like on the countywide programs, any savings will be directed towards the competitive program categories. So looking at the Smart Signals program, we would propose expanding the about 360 locations to, potentially 300 more locations around the county. It would include integration of Caltrans ramp intersections, which we know is important for the locals to be able to manage those and coordinate those, to extend the software licensing services for the Phase 1 sites for an additional 5 years. So right now we've got 5 years of software and licensing on the Phase 1 cameras. We want to extend that to 10 years. We also want to include battery backup systems on all the locations, cloud-based emergency vehicle preemption and transit signal priority, and then adaptive traffic control and CV2X, which is really connected vehicles to everything. So getting the most that we can out of the Smart Signals and making sure that, transit, emergency vehicles, and, are all part of the connectivity from this program. Oops. So as part of the Safe Routes to Schools countywide program, we are proposing non-infrastructure activities again, includes Street Smarts Contra Costa expansion of walk and roll, and mapping of additional school sites beyond the sites that were identified in OBAG 3. So that, this is what we've heard from the locals, that they want the number of school sites expanded. So expanding the mapping of those.
Matt, maybe just to add, one thing that was really important, we were only able to map one elementary school per jurisdiction in OBAG 3, and the cities have made it very clear that they want to get all the rest of the schools mapped. So what our plan right now is for this program is to, what is it going to take for us to get the rest of the schools in the county mapped into the system? And then how do we then leverage our existing assemblies with the Street Smarts program and expansion of walk and roll into all the RTPC subregions to then maximize the kind of impact we're having in reducing traffic and safety issues around schools.
Okay, quick question. Would this potentially cover things like funding for crossing guards that sometimes are shared by the local jurisdiction and the school district?
We haven't necessarily looked into that, but that could be an open conversation.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
I can speak to the next one too. So the other one that we've been talking quite a bit about in past meetings and in RTPC meetings is looking at how do we get a countywide youth transportation transit program in particular. Because of the requirements of OBAG 4, it would have to be a Clipper-based program. So we've been in conversation with Clipper Bay Pass around what is possible for a expansion of transit programming for students within the county. Currently, you guys know that the makeup across our RTPCs is that in West County, they have 30-day passes, and it has to be on one operator. And we are considering a pilot in Transpac that will be going to their board next week. How do we get to something that is countywide? And we're using this as a way to test what a future program could look like that serves students from across the county, and also by using BayPass, hopefully has some cost savings for us so that we can get more passes for each RTPC and really get as many kids passes as possible that are also agnostic to the bus operator, so that they can, for the kids that are going across county or bus operator lines, they don't have to worry about coverage and paying for those trips.
Yeah, and maybe just to add, and Danielle can kick me under the table if I say something wrong here, but these funds would not be available until when? 27, 28, right? Correct? So right now what we're planning on doing is proposing like a pilot. We're proposing a pilot, with Central County and County Connection about a similar program like this, right? And so that's what Danielle's been working on. We plan on bringing that to the board here in the next couple of months. But the idea is like do this pilot and then understand more, learn more, and then basically do expansion countywide with these funds. That's kind of the game plan.
So, and I do have some questions about this. So $20 million is a lot. And so, and I heard, the Transpac region, but I didn't hear anything about, East County. And so I'm just trying to understand, is the whole 20 million just for Central County, or no, or it's?
No, so this would be countywide.
Okay,
So right
okay.
now you have the 20B funding in West County that is limited. So that is only paying for 2,000 kids. The pilot that we're planning on doing in Transpac is also only 2,000 kids. So the funding is to think about expansion way beyond that and across all of the RTPCs.
Okay, and would this be, because we've had many conversations about this, and it's very complicated, and I appreciate all the work you've been doing, Danielle.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand if we said yes to this, because again, 20 million is a large amount of money. Is it just for like that group that we were talking about that they have trouble getting to school because they've
Yeah.
moved away from their district, or is it, who are
Yeah.
we talking about?
At a bare minimum, it's the kids that are in SOAR, that are in McKinney-Vento. So if you're homeless, juvenile justice, recent refugee, unaccompanied minor, all of those, that's our bare minimum. That is the one that is around 2,000 kids. When we start to look at how much we can afford with that, we then look at the income disparities and what the kind of next qualification is. And my hope is that we can get as many kids covered as possible. So when we're negotiating with BayPass of what is possible, I think that'll tell us, we're waiting for answers right now on like what the full cost is going to be. It may be that we can fund a lot more than we think is possible because we can get a bulk discount. And that's what we were trying to figure out. So that 20 million may come down depending on what we get back from MTC on the cost of the individual passes. Right now, like for West County for 20B, we pay $35 to $37 per kid a month for passes. And Bay Pass is saying that they can get that number down. And if we get the number down, then we can give way more passes to kids.
Okay.
So trying to kind of like keep figuring out what is possible of how many kids we can get with the amount of money that we have.
Okay, and how did we get to 20 million? Like, where is, since we're still kind of trying to figure it out, is
Yeah.
that like, where, yeah, where?
I did a
where-
very conservative number based on what the current cost of passes are. So that's why I'm hoping that if we can get a significant discount with Bay Pass, that we can bring that number down.
But I mean,
Yeah.
did you, when you, to get to the 20 million?
Yeah, it's
did
the
you
number
say-
of kids
Okay.
versus the cost of the pass versus
So how
the
many
time
kids are
period.
we talking?
Oof.
Because
It was
that's,
by the
I
number
think
of
that's what I'm
school.
trying to
Yeah.
understand, because our goal, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, but we've been talking about like, how do we get it? And I appreciate
Yeah.
like the focus on the one population you're talking about, the most vulnerable. But I think we're also trying to figure out like, how do we get the kids that, just, we're also trying to deal with the traffic congestion and keeping,
Mm-hmm.
Parents, middle-class parents from having to drop their kids off. So that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
what number?
We would still, I mean, if we can't fund every single child, if we can only afford to fund the ones that are having, below the federal poverty line, that we still would have like the TFCA incentive pass to class programs and additional programs that could be more of the choice ridership if we can't fund them. Right now, what I'm basing it off of is how much we can get for the full cost of a $35 pass. That is what we currently have in our programs, but it's sounding like we can get to $10 to $20 a month per kid in a bulk Bay Pass program. So that's what, we'll be doing a lot more development on this proposal over the next couple of months, long before we submit this to MTC. So it's a very conservative estimate right now.
So if, just pure math, Danielle, just really quick. So you take $20 million and divide that by $35 a kid. So are you saying that we're able to reach 571,000 students?
It was, think about it by month.
So it's by month?
Yeah.
So yeah, so you got to divide that by 12, sorry. Yeah, you're right. All right, so we're talking 50,000 kids,
Okay, no, and so that's helpful for me to know.
just
'cause
to
it-
give you an order of magnitude. So it's like yeah, that's at 35. So we're talking 50,000 kids
Across the county.
across the county.
Okay.
Just
Okay,
to give
okay.
you rough
I just want to
numbers.
like understand who we're.
Order of
okay,
magnitude there.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I think the key here is like, there's a lot of student programs across the entire county, and I think the goal here is to Danielle's point, is to do like this bulk with Bay Pass and have just one consistent student program across the entire county, one program, and not have all these different programs, so I mean, that's kind of the goal here, is to just make it really easy to use and really, and really simple and really accessible for everyone in the entire county, regardless of what subregion you're in, so you can get across the county, go through just certain subregions, use the pass across different operators, all these things, right? So it's just like one platform, so.
Thank you.
If-
Yes, go ahead, yeah. Oh,
Well,
we've
and
got
I'm
two, so
just
Ken and
wondering,
then you.
as we have these conversations, we're incorporating the work we have done using the TFCA money to put that data into it, to say, this is the impact it's having in a positive way, because we don't necessarily have the TFCA tracking issues and the data issues if we do it a different way. Not that we don't want to know, I mean, we do, but.
Yeah, it's, we're also planning in the survey that we're doing this summer for the student program, we asked a lot of really specific questions about what people would like to see in a countywide program going forward. So we hope that, we'll push it out to you guys to share with all of your networks, and we'll hopefully get as many responses as possible to really understand what the need is and what people would like to see with this, too.
So with the Clipper Bay Pass, are we able to track usage and where that usage is?
It doesn't get to the granular level, like, we don't know, like, where someone's getting on and where someone's getting off, but we can look at the, like, anonymized, aggregated to see the big trends of where people are going and how they're using it.
Per operator?
Yes, as I understand it from MTC. The way that Clipper Bay Pass works is that is like anonymized for user privacy, so it's more about the aggregated trip information.
Interesting. Yes, Commissioner Xavier.
You're talking about the possibility of students going from one transit agency to to another. What kind of time are we talking about for these kids to be on public transit? Like, what time do they have to get up in the morning to go to school? That's a big concern of mine, because
Yeah.
there's so much time involved.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm hearing over and over again is that it would also be helpful to just understand these big overall patterns of what are some of these children facing in terms of is the existing transit system providing for their needs and how to get to school? Are the schedules lining up? And we were asking a lot of that in the survey this summer of, is it meeting your needs for your school schedule, your after-school activity schedule? Are the routes where they need to be for you to be getting to school? And we're trying to gather as much of that feedback as possible. I've also been talking to the school districts about how much more data they can start to provide us too about where they know where people are living versus going to school. So we can just look at these overall patterns and see, does this line up with our existing transit routes and existing plans? So that will also be included in our work.
Okay, thank you. I think you can continue your presentation.
Do you want to do this one too? Okay. So the next one is on TDM. This is less focused on TDM programs and more focused on, we need to do an update to the kind of county-wide model ordinance for TDM. We're getting a lot of requests from the cities to have additional tools available when they are getting large developments and the developments are needing to meet requirements set by the state or region, making sure that there is a closer link to our existing planning and programming activities so that we're balancing the carrot and stick element of TDM, that we want to make it as easy for people to comply with TDM requirements as possible in their developments in housing. And so the hope is that we can modernize and update this model TDM ordinance, but also make it flexible enough to work with all the different types of cities and development patterns that we have across our county, and that we're developing kind of this like toolkit or suite of options that can be available for cities to use off the shelf for any of their developers or projects or programs to be able to use to meet compliance.
Yeah, and this goes hand in hand with like the CEQA requirements and CEQA impacts for developments, within your local jurisdictions and VMT requirements. And so like what this toolkit will be able to provide, and we're getting a lot of interest from local jurisdictions already, like Orinda, Richmond, El Cerrito, but really focused on like, how can cities start actually providing conditions of approvals to kind of stand up TDM programs to address those, so TDM is a very cost-effective way to deal with TDM rather than like capital improvements. And so like, how do we, knowing that the infrastructure is going to continue to be built out, like we got to start leaning into TDM programs to help mitigate traffic impacts, for development. And so the idea is to really kind of lean into like a toolkit to give them the tools necessary to do these like conditions of approval. But also what we don't want to happen is we don't want like a bunch of like developers creating a bunch of fragmented TDM programs across the entire county. And so the idea is like you're getting, like if a city elects to having a developer kind of use TDM as a mitigation tool, it then provides a structure in which they can participate within 501 CCTA and not necessarily, and take advantage of already an existing countywide program and infrastructure that's already stood up, rather than standing up individual new programs and putting all that infrastructure into place. So the idea is to really make this cost effective for local jurisdictions to be able to help developments mitigate for traffic impacts.
Okay, yes,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Are jurisdictions referring developers, and I know it's been kind of a slow period, but across the county, are jurisdictions referring developers to CCTA to discuss the mitigation efforts at this point? Because we've clearly, in my opinion, needed to be doing that going back 30 years.
I mean, this is something that, this is a different conversation. I think this is what we're talking about in terms of modernizing the growth management program.
Right.
Because I think modernizing the growth management program, I mean, quite frankly, we don't even get consulted on general plans and circulation elements.
Well, you're part of the public, you should just.
And
know
so,
that. But
so
seriously, to send the developer to CCTA and say, look, let's come up with something besides putting in another, signal light or stop sign, which is only 30 yards from the last ones.
100%. Yeah, and I think, we are not just a funding agency. We've got a lot of experience, a lot of expertise here at CCTA that can help offer, recommendations, insights, solutions, to local jurisdictions and to developers. And so, yeah, I mean, if there's a development occurring in your local jurisdiction, we would love to participate in that, and be a part of the conversation, rather than being, an afterthought when we get sent the CEQA document, like, here's the CEQA document, we satisfied our requirements, like, we would love to be part of the conversation. And I think, and I know, like, Concord's already reached out to us.
Good.
So
I thought
Concord,
we
I mean,
are.
just particularly a good example is Concord's reached out to us, and we're working with Josh at Brookfield, and, we're talking to him about some opportunities, around that. And I think, we have some insights that can help, and because, Transpac doesn't necessarily have a fee program like the other subregions, and so they kind of really rely on the local jurisdictions mitigating their traffic impacts. And so that's something we're closely watching, and we got to work with Concord, and we got to make sure everyone is satisfying the growth management program, so that way Concord can continue to be eligible for their return to source.
Well, and to your point, though, as we're sitting here, so I'm very glad to hear that Concord is standing up as a good example in this instance. But as we're sitting here, I'm thinking aloud about the property adjacent to the Naval Weapons Station, the Coast Guard site, which it's envisioned up to 900 homes. And I don't think that anybody's reached out to CCTA about that. And as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about what's the reaction from the public anytime you're doing anything. What's going to happen with the traffic? I'm going to be trapped here. So I see CCTA potentially being able to help us address that. So I'm going to put you in contact with those folks as well. So that's a great, thank you very much for that suggestion. Anybody else have anything? Okay. Is it you, Danielle, or is it Matt?
I could probably take over from here. So the fifth countywide category we've budgeted $500,000 to update our EV readiness blueprint. It was adopted back in 2019. EV infrastructure is not eligible under OBAG 4, so putting together a plan or updating the plan that would make it easier for jurisdictions to obtain grant funding sources from the myriad of EV funding sources that are out there, we thought would be a good use of the OBAG 4 funds. And we're actually applying to do that through another grant funding source right now. So if that comes through, we will kind of remove this from the list. But we do think this really needs to be updated to support our local jurisdictions. So we wanted to give you an idea of how the pot of money for the coordinated call lines up in terms of our countywide programs versus the competitive funding sources. So if you go through line by line, there's about $36 million that we are proposing to go towards the countywide programs, and about $59 million in competitive, split amongst all 5 fund sources. And that's, ratio of 38% to 62%. So, we are confident that there's a whole lot of money that, can be competitive. That won't go to everybody. There will be a long list of non-winners for that list, but we think the countywide program really, will make sure everybody is getting funding. And we also want to make it clear that, a lot of project sponsors would have a hard time scoring well under the OBAG 4 county program, just on their own. So having this countywide approach, we've shown historically scores much better at the regional level. And I will get into that regional scoring component in just a second, but also wanted to break down by funding source what we did in OBAG 3 as compared to OBAG 4. And just as Tim mentioned before, there were no local funds as part of OBAG 3. The overall OBAG amount was a little higher, but since we've added the $45 million in TLC and PBTF, we think that kind of more than makes up for it. And really, we're like I said, the goal is to spread the money around the county as much as we possibly can. So that's scoring. So we, on the OBAG projects, for all projects, we will be scoring a maximum of 75 points based on those 12 criteria. Once we score the OBAG 4 projects and submit them back to MTC, they then get to apply 25 additional points in their regional scoring. So looking at, alignment with Plan Bay Area strategies, how it performs on the federal level, and deliverability, how well did these project sponsors, including CCTA, deliver in previous cycles. And then 10 additional points can be applied by MTC for projects with air quality benefits. So there's actually 110 points available. And so we don't know how our 75 points will, how that'll align us with the final list. That's something we, kind of don't hear back from until MTC's done their scoring, which will be done this fall and probably announced early next year. But as Tim stated, we did very well last year because of our countywide program approach and received more than our target. So what we've heard, this is a summary of what we've heard kind of over the last few months. That we had proposed requiring that jurisdictions have a required, or that have a Vision Zero ordinance or policy on board. We heard loud and clear that was too onerous, so we moved that from eligibility requirement to scoring criteria. So if you do have an adopted Vision Zero policy, you will get some bonus points in the scoring. We provided OBAG 4 funding for transit. The transit folks reached out and were worried there wasn't enough money, kind of that transit operators had a good chance of receiving. TLC is eligible for them, but a lot of that does go to local jurisdictions for their active transportation projects. So we did provide a small carve out there. They wanted more detail. Folks wanted more detail on the countywide program, so we provided that in our presentation today. There was a request for clarification on the OBAG 4 versus TLC scoring, and as I mentioned, we're using the same 12 criteria, but that it can be flexible for the TLC based on RTPC preference, and that we're providing flexibility on minimum project funding to allow for those quick build projects. So keeping the minimum funding amount lower for those categories. And then we did take that, we've taken this to TCC, our Technical Coordinating Committee, 3 times. And last month, at the May meeting, we did hear some concerns from them. Their overall comments were that they wanted more funding to go to the competitive programs from the countywide programs. We do still think that potential is there based on our current proposal to apply any savings, like what Danielle described, in terms of our negotiations with MTC on our countywide applications. That right now we're proposing $7.5 million for the 2 competitive programs, and that any savings from the 5 countywide programs would be infused into that the $7.5 million. And their other comment was that they were worried that there wouldn't be enough time for them to submit applications that would meet all the program criteria, and the staff really kind of wanted to push back on that recommendation, just because splitting the due dates of the application, which was their proposal, would really kind of remove the coordinated or the coordination from the coordinated call for projects. We think having all the applications come in at the same time, would allow the screening committee to see the breadth of applications that come in, to know, that there may be issues with some of the projects that may not score well under OBAG, that may do just fine under TLC. But if we were to only get OBAG 4 applications in August and then get the TLC and PBTF, in September or sometime later, would really not give us the ability to appropriately fund projects, with the right funding category, and to really have all the knowledge we think we'd need up front. So we really wanted to bring that to you today and have you weigh in, because we want this to remain a coordinated call for projects. We're going to do everything we can to make sure the jurisdictions have the resources they need to submit their applications on time. Staff will be holding office hours, making sure all applicants can have time with us to discuss. We've already been holding informal office hours just based on our discussions at TCC and at the RTPCs. So we're already talking to project sponsors, but did want to daylight those comments on the staff proposal that came from TCC. We didn't hear similar comments from the RTPCs other than WICTAC, where we heard similar comments on the amount of funding for competitive versus the countywide programs.
Hey, Matt, just really quick, I just want to chime in on this, because I think in terms of like this $7 million or $10 million of additional, competitive funding, if you can go back a few slides, Matt, really quick, just going back to right there, perfect. No, right there. So I think the important thing to note here is that like in OBAG 3, there was this coordinated countywide approach, right? And so we roughly had, I forget actually, Matt, roughly what, there was like $32 million of the $48 million that was countywide, and then the rest went towards competitive as part of OBAG 3?
Yeah, the 18.3 million.
It was 18.3 million, right? So there was 18.3 million as part of the 48 million. So we're roughly in the same ratios in terms of pot of money compared to OBAG 3 and OBAG 4, right? Roughly to like this, and so if you look at this 43.1 million and 45.1 million, 95 million, if you look at it, that's why we kind of held the same split in terms of like having over 60% of it being competitive. It's kind of roughly the same split that we had in OBAG 3, and so, and I think the other key part is that obviously if we make more competitive and less countywide, that just means there's less money being split and shared across all jurisdictions, right? And I think the key to the approach relative to the countywide programs is making sure and ensuring that every local jurisdiction is really trying to get their like fair share, out of the OBAG outside of this competitive piece. And because we have these local dollars now at the table, we can do more of that with the OBAG funds and making sure that the local funds are now competitive, And so, and I think the other benefit is that, as you're all very aware, MTC is requiring has more requirements on these federal funds. And so the idea is that MTC is really shepherding the majority of these federal funds to really not necessarily that way CCTA is taking on the burden of doing all the federal reporting, the requirements, all that stuff on the federal funds, whereas the TLC PPTF is fairly clean local dollars that can go out directly to local jurisdictions as part of the competitive pot. So the idea is really like, we've got the same split relative to competitive, right, between OBAG 3 and OBAG 4. There's more funding available, and technically there's like less eligibility requirements, So I just want to make sure that's like, we see a lot of benefit in terms of the way it's currently structured. And the countywide programs, very much align, at least from my perspective, like what we're hearing from the authority board are in terms relative to priorities, in terms of, everyone loves the smart signals. Let's continue to expand and get that coordinated approach. Everyone wants to see safe route to schools and more walk and roll programs and street smart assemblies. That's been, and then also obviously this student transit program. Those are like the three key programs that we've been talking a lot about with the authority board, and these funds are the best funds to really implement those types of programs outside of Measure J. Because as you know, as we're experiencing even with the TransPac dollars, there's very limited funding left for these types of programs. And so this is a huge opportunity with OBAG to be able to fund this countywide student program as well as expand Safe Route to Schools, which we would not necessarily be able to do with just Measure J dollars that we have available to us. So we feel like this current structure we have, it really is a great balance between, again, balancing these like regional and local needs and really achieving the priorities of CCTA, and also putting the, over 60% of these funds out to the locals to be able to, submit their favorite projects, for selection or for review.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments? Yes, Commissioner Carlson.
Yeah, I was going to jump ahead on Matt and go to the calendar in the sense of, you raised a couple of points. One, there are some additional criteria that MTC is looking at when it comes to the OBEG and the Fed dollars. And so looking at the calendar, and I want to make sure that, everybody's given the opportunity. I love the model. The coordinated model is the way to go. I think it benefits us the best, but I'm worried that smaller jurisdictions that might have a pet project are going to be a little more challenged to try and hit on all those points to get the highest score possible. And I'm just wondering, we're looking and we're going to release this. We're already in the first week of June. And looking at some of the gaps in here. So to extend the actual deadline for the jurisdictions 30 days, is that going to be hugely disruptive? And I'm a firm believer in having a deadline because people will just, keep dragging that out. Without a deadline, it gets kicked. But I also don't want to open the door up, well, if you want to petition us for a 30-day extension, no. So I'm just looking at potentially another 30 days. If they're having to, granted, they might have a lot of this work already done, but I want to make sure they're given every opportunity. And so really the turnaround here is 6 weeks, if not less, right?
During the summer, too.
Yeah.
When people are on vacation.
So that's the only concern I have. I just want to make sure everybody's got a fair chance to play.
Yeah, our absolute drop-dead deadline is getting the OBAG for our county priorities to MTC by the 31st of October. So
Of 26.
of 26. That
Okay.
means this board will have to approve that list at the October meeting. And MDC says there is no flexibility on that. We would lose
Yeah,
40
we don't,
42
I don't want to
43
risk
million.
that.
TFCA is similar, that we have, the funding agreement goes to the board in July, and then we have 6 months to execute the funding agreements, and we have, usually, everything is due to TFCA, or to the Air District by the first week of November.
Oh, my favorite people. Sorry. My mic was on. Sorry, I apologize. No, I just want to make sure that everybody's got fair play, but I want to make sure we get the work done as well, so.
Yeah, and
And I'm not a planner, and I'm not a
Yeah.
grant writer and all of that, so.
so somewhere between releasing the call for projects later this month and being due, we're proposing being due the first week in August, which is really barely 6 weeks. But we wanted to reserve enough time for projects to be screened and scored, and then get to you for the October meeting. So it does not leave us a large amount of time. We could maybe push it back a week or 2 weeks.
If you think you can, I mean, again.
I think, Matt, you tell me no if you think it's, because what we're doing is we're just compressing the time between getting TCC and doing all the application review and all that stuff. And, it takes time because we got to schedule TCC meetings and we've got all these things that need to happen. And we're also dark in August too, which is also kind of an issue that compresses the time as well. So I think if we were going to budge on this at all, I would say maximum maybe 2 weeks, like we could give 8 weeks. I would say though, that's why we have so many office hours.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to be available to support the smaller jurisdictions, to give them guidance on how to put together great projects and fill out the applications and all those things. So I think Matt and team are going to make themselves available to the jurisdictions and the sponsors to help support, answering any questions that they might have. So hopefully the jurisdictions are taking advantage of the office hours, and so, but I think, I'll kind of defer to Matt because he's the one coordinating all the work and doing all the work, but 1 to 2 weeks, maybe, if that.
If that can keep everything coordinated, I'm all for that. Yeah, I think it would just involve slightly more accelerated meeting schedule with TCC and the scoring subcommittee.
Yeah, I guess the other risk too is actually the RTPCs too, because the RTPCs have to schedule their own meetings to be able to review all the TLC stuff, right? So I mean, we're also compressing the time on the RTPCs to review all the TLC stuff, right?
So we are allowing more time for the RTPCs to complete they don't have to submit TLC to us by the October timeframe, so.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so it's really the TCC scoring subcommittee that is going to have to do the additional work. For TLC, we don't have that set deadline, but we still want all of the applications to come in at the same time.
But the TCCs have to have their work done in September to get it in front of the CCTA board for October. So those are really the hard lines in the sand. And if you don't think we can make that, that's fine, that's just where we are, right? But if a week gives them that little bit of flexibility.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, we can give that some more thought.
Yeah,
We'll give that some
and
more
again, it's
thought.
not something I'm willing to, not the hill.
Yeah, we can give that some more thought. I think the other thing is we definitely want to try to bring it to this committee and not necessarily take it directly to the board either. And so in order to bring it to planning committee in October, we have to have all the staff reports and everything done, by end of September,
Yeah, but you'll have from June to do that.
So it's okay. So it just, again, it compresses everything. But we can take in consideration that and see if we can maybe be a little flexible.
Yeah, we'll return to the board with our kind of updated
Recommendation.
proposal, yeah.
Okay. Do you have one more slide that you wanted to go over?
Oh, probably, yeah, next steps. So we'll continue to coordinate local compliance on behalf of the local jurisdictions, continue our outreach to the RTPs on their TLC scoring. Hopefully, later this month, the board will approve the release of the call. We will be holding all those office hours. We'll be adding some earlier days as well to that list you saw earlier. And then we are required by MTC to document our outreach, which includes meetings like this and all of our other meetings. So we will be doing that as well as part of our overall submittal to MTC. So that's all I had for today.
Thank you. So does anybody have any other questions or comments? Okay, so I do have a few. So I am in support of this coordinated call for projects. I think it makes a lot of sense. I appreciate how thoughtful that's been. And I'm just wondering, so I'm of two minds. I just wanted to see how others, I'm assuming everybody is in support of this. I mean, obviously, I understand the projects that you've chosen, I'm trying to get back to the slide, the countywide signal program, as well as the Safe Routes to Schools. I know that everybody in this room and at our RTPC supports those. I'm just wondering, what is the harm of having those be scored competitively along with other local submissions? Like, do you think, so these two specifically, right? Because you're doing these set-asides, like for these two specific programs, right? Like you're already, allocating funding. So is the thought that you've heard pretty much unanimously that everybody supports these anyway? And so even if they were set up against like a local submission, like a local jurisdiction submission for OBAG, these would rise to the top? Is that what the thought is?
Yeah, I mean, it's also a thought of just continuation. So like, for example, like Matt talked about the countywide smart signals, and there are associated licensing subscriptions and fees and those types of things that are tied to the smart signals that would be a continuation from the first phase, the 5 years. So we're doing like another subscription. So think of it more as about like a continuation of already a project that's really successful with the local jurisdictions. And so, yeah, so the thought is like, this is already widely supported. The cities are already asking for it. The cities are already excited about adding more intersections, and, you know, Ryan and Andy have been doing all the legwork with this and already getting that support. So, and then similarly to Safe Route to Schools, I mean, I can count on two hands right now.
I
Which,
do know that.
yeah, which cities are already asking for expanded mapping of all the schools within their jurisdictions. Because I mean, I think there were some cities that were really disappointed that they only got to map one school in their jurisdiction, and there's a lot of local jurisdictions that are actually asking for mapping all their schools in their jurisdictions. And so I know this is another one that'll be very widely supported on the Safe Route to Schools. And then student transit, I mean, that kind of speaks for itself, I think. I think that seems to be a priority for the board and also for our transit operators, as well as across the county.
And I think, so going back to the countywide smart signals, there are the 3 areas that have been identified, but is there anything like for East County, for example, like, are there new, because it says 300 new locations, so outside of the 3 areas that have already, like Concord, Danville, La Miranda, is there anything for East County or West County that's been identified? Because again,
Oh, yeah.
I'm just trying to think about.
Yeah, if you go to the
Okay.
map, Matt, like,
That's what this is showing?
yeah,
Okay,
that's what
'cause
that
I've got
map
the
shows,
slide
is
up.
all those
Okay.
like red dots. But, so the current phase 1 is 365 intersections, so this is an additional 300 intersections. So we're almost like, we're gonna double, right?
Okay.
And you have to keep in mind that in Contra Costa County, there's roughly 1,200 signalized intersections total.
Oh,
So
boy.
we're only like halfway there, even after phase 2.
Okay.
And so, and I think with this, what's interesting is part of phase 1, and Ryan and Andy can correct me if I'm wrong here, but as part of phase 1, we were kind of hitting the major arterials, you know, and I think this phase 2, I think, is also probably even more excitement from the local jurisdiction, because now we're be able to hit, like,
Can see it.
you can see more expansion and more roads and more local roads, and now we're starting to get down to those minor arterials, not necessarily the routes of regional significance. For example, like in West County specifically, Richmond Parkway was not part of the phase 1, and so I know Richmond's really excited about including Richmond Parkway as part of phase 2. So I mean, we do see, you know, there's a lot of excitement around all the expansion of locations around phase 2. And I don't know, can I get a head nod from Andy and Ryan? Thumbs up? Am I saying the right thing? Okay, thank you.
Well, and I just, again, I mean, my colleagues here from East and West County, it looks like you're on board with this. Because it would also benefit your regions, right? Like phase 2, what we're seeing on the map. Okay. And then just my last question. So again, as you mentioned, I think alluded to a little bit, Tim, so there's more and more requirements for any of this funding, right? And matching grants. And I know that it's hard for cities to, I should talk in the microphone, it's hard for cities sometimes to come up with that matching fund. I don't know if all of you have had that issue, but it's, you know, applying for a grant, but then do we have enough to do the match if we're successful? And so I was just wondering if there's an opportunity, given that Danielle had mentioned that there is some flexibility with the 20 million, is it possible to maybe take some of that money, like maybe 10 million, and put that into some kind of fund to help the cities have like a matching, you know what I'm saying, being able to access some matching funds, especially, you know, some of the jurisdictions that don't have as large of a budget. So I just wondered if there was any opportunity to have some flexibility there.
Yeah, I mean, so the 20 million is federal funds, so we would need local match, you know, for the federal funds. And that's something that we're working out with the local jurisdictions right now on the countywide programs, is to get the local match for those. Same way that we did in OBAG 3. So OBAG 3 on the smart signal systems on phase 1, there was, you know, roughly $32 million available for smart signals, and then the cities actually provided the local jurisdiction, and there was this master cooperative agreement that went around. So we're doing a similar approach on the countywide programs. But I think, to your point, that is the benefit of the coordinated call for projects, because what we can do, particularly that competitive pot, you know, we can, there's about $7-8 million in the competitive pot, is we can, as we do the coordinated call, we can look for opportunities to see if there's really good projects that could potentially get those federal funds, like let's say a really significant arterial rehab project or a bicycle project, and then we could potentially look at how we can leverage, you know, part of the TLC PPTF for the local match for those federal funds. You know, so I mean, that's the benefit of the coordinated call, is to be able to be able to look at all of these things, and potentially like the TFCA, we could potentially use the TFCA as local match for one of those projects. You know, so it's just, that is the benefit of the coordinated approach, is being able to see all those applications as one, because we can, you know, like Hisham and the team are really good at this, right? In terms of like matching up and developing these funding plans for each of these projects. And so, and I think that is the value of doing this like massive coordinated call. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I think, I mean, I think so. I think so. So it sounds like there's not a need to move around any of the money that is like proposed to be allocated as you have it now. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, I think there's enough flexibility kind of built into the coordinated call that we'll be able to kind of make those determinations as we kind of go through the evaluation of the projects, you know, and then again, this is why it's important that we have these office hours, because we can work with the local jurisdictions on what those matching requirements will look like, and help them identify, you know, local fund sources for the actual match.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for bearing with me. Yes, Commissioner Carlson.
Yeah, well, just to follow up on the conversation about the countywide programs and jurisdiction, they were being competitive. I think it's really good, because it looks to me like we have our 4 countywide projects. We put that out there. The jurisdictions now, because they're only allowed 2 project applications essentially, can narrow that, knowing, hey, we've got this, or at least that's what's in the pool for us. And now we can focus in on our local jurisdiction project that's going to impact us directly. And that gives them a little more breadth, you know, in the sense of their specific, to try and go and say, look, we're going to pull out, and we're going to, you know, we want to compete for, you know, the transit pass. One, if we were to get it, then are you out of it because you bid for it, or you're trying to create it on your own, those types of things.
I see what you're saying.
I think us being out there in front of it with those 4 countywide projects really helps the smaller jurisdictions as well. And so I don't know if that was the intent, but it clearly is a benefit, I think, for our jurisdictions.
I mean, it's the same reason why OBAG 3 and the coordinated countywide approach was so successful. I mean, every jurisdiction got money out of it, regardless of what size you were in the county. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't see any other green lights on. So thank you for this discussion. Thank you for the presentation. Is there anyone in the room who would like to make public comment, or anyone online?
We have a public comment from Leah Greenblatt.
Okay, great. Let's hear it.
Leah?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Leah Greenblatt, I'm with WICTAC, and I'm the current chair of the TCC. And the staff report doesn't fully represent the TCC's extensive and ultimately unanimously recommended changes to the CCTA's proposal. And some of the concerns, I think, I can try to highlight here in my few minutes, but happy to expand if you allow me. So I think what's new here is with OBAG 3, you didn't have the Measure J funds. And the Measure J funds really don't have the restrictions that the OBAG funds have. And so that the TCC was very concerned that there was up to as much as $45 million available, and only 7.5% of that was competitive, compared to other counties that make most of that, their county allotments available to local jurisdictions to apply for. And, you know, we're not asking, the TCC wasn't asking for the delay of the OBAG MTC funds. It was just saying, let's postpone, or not postpone, but let's just stretch the schedule a little bit more to give flexibility to local staff to apply for the TLC funds at, you know, a slightly later date. And by doing that, it right now the proposal before you is to limit jurisdictions to 2 applications. and the county and BART get 4 applications. But with the split that the TCC proposed in the scheduling, it would allow jurisdictions to submit 2 OBAG applications and separately 2 TLC PBTF applications, so that they would have more access to apply for the funds. I think that's a pretty critical part of what their recommendation was. I think that there was, there's a lot of support for those countywide programs, and that's why they recommended just a slight $10 million takeaway from those 4 or 5, maybe there's 6 countywide programs, and shift that to the competitive funds to make those available across the county to the local jurisdictions. And we asked to review the call for projects before it's released. And I'm happy to, the chair was tasked with conferring with staff, CCTA staff on this. So we'd like to see, I think I got cut off.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment?
We do not have any additional public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to bring it back to the committee. So was there anything? So we heard that public comment, and I just wanted to check with staff. So will there be future opportunities for the TCC to, as we go through this process, to provide any additional input or review?
So, we did visit the TCC 3 times, including a couple of weeks ago, and that was intended to be their final look at the proposal. So, yeah, their next meeting would be the day after your board meeting this month, where we're asking for approval to release the call for projects.
Okay, thank you. So it would be appropriate then, since for, if they want to submit a letter or something for the full board to review. Were you going to say something, Tim?
Yeah, I was just gonna articulate. I mean, I think the staff report does reflect the TCC comments. We specifically already mentioned to you the split of this timing and date issue that we've already talked about. So we discussed that with you today. And I think we also talked about the value of keeping the countywide allotment intact, to be able to get the priorities that we're looking for relative to that. And relative to, again, the comparison between OBAG 3 and OBAG 4, I mean, that's why we put that slide up there, is because, again, in OBAG 3, roughly 60% of it was available for the countywide programs. And with this call for projects, there's actually, so let me just make sure I make myself really clear. In OBAG 3, there was 60% of the funds that were used for these countywide programs that got spread across all the local jurisdictions, and 30% that was basically competitive. With this OBAG 4 proposal, we're literally flipping that on its head to get, as a total pot, $95 million, there is over 60% competitive and 30 to 40% now for countywide programs. So we're actually making available more money for local projects in this call for projects than there was available in OBAG 3. And so it's really important to recognize that we are making sure that every jurisdiction, again, given the requirements and the structure of this coordinated call, that every jurisdiction is going to get, I'll say, a fair share of this funding through OBAG, as well as provide a larger opportunity for competitive projects for sponsors through this call for projects. So I just want to really directly respond to Leah on her comment, because I think we feel like the structure is really set up in a way that addresses everyone's, and again, there's a lot of voices here, right? We've got a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of RTPCs, and including the board, and we feel like that the way it's currently structured really does a really good job of balancing both the countywide priorities and making a significant amount of money available for a competitive pot for local project sponsors, which does not have a lot of requirements on it because we're using those TLC PBTF funds. And as we mentioned earlier, in terms of the schedule, we've already said we'll take a look at the schedule, see if we can maybe give more time for locals to submit their applications, relative to the smaller cities, as Leah was mentioning. I think we've already addressed that point as part of the staff report.
Yes, Commissioner Carlson.
Yeah, unless I'm reading this wrong, can you pop up, Matt, slide 19? Because under that, the TLC 1225 and the PBTF 1326, cycle 3, is $45.1 million. That's the competitive pool outside of the active transportation and safety program, which is also competitive for another 5. So we're looking at $50.1 million in the competitive grant pool, as opposed to the 43. I'm just trying to get validation that I can read.
Yeah, in terms of numbers, in OBAG 3, there was only 18 million competitive in OBAG 3, and now there's 59 million. Go back to that slide, Matt. There's 59 million competitive in this call for projects.
Okay, you're on 18. No, what slide are you on?
You want to look at 19?
Which slide were you
I
on?
was looking at 19.
Oh, 19?
That's it.
Yeah, so you can see it here. Yeah, so you can see it there.
Yeah, I'm just seeing it as 50.1, but you were saying a different number? That's why I was looking for a different.
So go back to slide. So this shows you the difference. So you got 95 million. So there's 35 million for the countywide and then 59 million for the competitive.
Yeah, I wasn't looking at the CARE and or the TFCA money. So you're even bigger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, is there any further discussion or a motion or, yes, Commissioner Meadows?
I move approval of item 4.A.
Okay, Commissioner Carlson?
Second.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. And Terry Ann, if you would please do a roll call vote.
Commissioner Armstrong,
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier,
Hi.
Vice Chair Meadows.
Yes.
Chair Obringer.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have one more item that's going to be presented to us, also by Matt Kelly. It's the Countywide Community-Based Transportation Plan.
Thank you, Chair Obringer. Good afternoon again. It's getting to be late afternoon. Matt Kelly, Director of Planning. I'm joined here today by Catherine Tebow from Mott McDonald, as well as Ivy Morrison from Circle Point. They are the consultants who assisted us in preparing the Contra Costa Countywide Community-Based Transportation Plan. So we will walk you through the plan, what it does, how it can be implemented, how we got to where we are today. So really just talking about the timeline, the areas we studied, the community engagement, which was a big portion of this project, and the scoring and recommendations of the projects that we ultimately landed on. So what is a community-based transportation plan? Well, it's a very different type of planning process where it starts with the community, very grassroots, where we are looking for the community to identify issues that they face in their daily lives when trying to get around their neighborhood or getting to work or a medical appointment, and really focusing on low-income communities, those that have been identified by MTC as part of their equity priority communities in Plan Bay Area. And really these CBTPs try and bring those local residents, community-based organizations, advocacy groups, and transportation agencies like CCTA together to identify the issues and challenges that people experience trying to get around in these communities, and then identify solutions to those barriers, and develop strategies or projects to overcome them. And just some examples of the types of challenges we hear about are lighting issues. I can't, it's hard to see when I'm walking down the sidewalk or trying to get to my transit stop. Sidewalks are cracked, making those who have mobility issues have difficulty just getting down the street. No bike facilities, people feel unsafe. Let's turn on my video. Unsafe trying to ride a bike around town, and or transit is limited, doesn't run in my area or doesn't run at the frequency that makes it an option for me. So, you aren't hearing generally about big capital intensive projects. You're usually hearing about kind of small projects that people experience just walking out their door. So how does this fit into the broader planning of CCTA and planning in Contra Costa County? The CBTPs are generally a short-term or near-term planning document where we're looking out about 2 to 5 years, and projects I mentioned are kind of easier in terms of scoping and less capitally intensive, can generally be constructed or implemented in the near term, whereas our countywide transportation plan is looking at longer term projects out 25 years. But really the CBTPs, both the ones we completed about 5 years ago and the ones we're talking about today that were just completed, feed into our countywide transportation plan, both around the goals and objectives, as well as the actual projects. So looking at the CB, is it your turn? I think it's your turn. I'm going to hand it off to Catherine to talk about the actual study area and the process we went through.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you today. So our planning process took about a year, and as a first order of business, as part of our analysis, we look to identify the equity priority communities within Contra Costa County. So those are the areas where, according to MTC's equity framework, there are higher concentrations of communities or population who typically face more barriers to transportation. So it could be either due to age, like older adults and youth, or people with lower income, with limited access to a private vehicle, or disabilities. So there were a variety of criteria that helped us draw our study area. And as you'll see in the draft plan that was included in your packet, it's slightly different than the area that were identified as part of the 2020-2021 CBTP. So our first task was really to update the data to have a more accurate representation of those communities. We were also focused on engaging with communities throughout the process, considering how grassroots the project was. So we had an engagement strategy that was developed and supported by Circle Point, and that really aimed to provide a variety of engagement opportunities throughout the lifetime of the project. So we had quarterly meetings with a steering committee, which included representatives from transit agencies as well as nonprofits who work directly with some of the equity priority communities. We also had 4 community events in each of our sub-regions where we went directly to talk with people about the mobility barriers that they face and what their priorities were and what types of projects they would like to see included in the plan. We had an online survey which was held during the fall for about 2 months, where we also asked about different priorities and projects, opportunities, and challenges that people face. And we had 2 virtual town halls. So the first one was held in December, where we presented to the community the results of our engagement, our community events, and our survey, trying to get the pulse and see if what we heard was representative of the reality within those 4 sub-communities. And then give people the opportunity to also identify additional priorities and projects. And then the last one was held in May, where we presented the preliminary list of projects and gave people the opportunity to chime in and also give them insight. So overall, we reached over 400 people throughout those different activities. So using the input that we got from the community engagement, we identified a variety of projects. As Matt mentioned, those were projects that aim to offer quick build relief and address barriers in those equity priority communities. So really focusing on projects that improve safety, that improve the experience of people walking and biking in those communities, improve access to transit services, and overall improving transit service and amenities. We made sure to have projects in each of the sub-regions, but also countywide. And then, as you see, we worked to identify projects that were identified throughout our community events, surveys, and town hall, but also we wanted to provide continuity with the previous CBTP. So we looked at the projects that were listed there and whether they had been realized, and if not, if they were still relevant and appropriate considering those new priorities that were identified. And then finally, our last project source was CCTA's congestion management plan, so identifying the projects within those 4 sub-communities and to see whether they would be appropriate to address the priorities that were identified by the communities. So that gave us over 100, close to 150 projects, which we then had to prioritize. So we looked at the evaluation criteria that were used in the previous CBTP and then revised them, and then we settled on the 4 evaluation criteria that you see listed here, really focusing on safety and accessibility, which were the 2 main themes that were identified throughout our engagement. And then in addition to that, we wanted to look at what specifically we heard through those events. So whenever there were projects that were highlighted multiple times or priorities that were highlighted multiple times across the different engagement activities that took place, then those projects ended up with a higher score. And then our last criteria was implementation readiness, trying to see if those projects were ready to go and ready to get implemented in the short term. So as you saw in the plan, there's a lot of projects that we wouldn't have the opportunity to really go through the entirety of them with you today, but you have the top ranking projects listed here, really showing the variety of projects across a different region. We really made a point to look at the common trends that we heard across the different engagement, but also trying to take a localized look and look at the projects specific to each of the communities. So we have a variety of projects. Some of them were really specific at the intersection level, while others were a little more broader based on what we heard in the project source. And ultimately, it just gives a path forward to help jurisdiction look at which project they should focus on first. And then just building on that, I'll pass it back to Matt to talk about implementation.
So, thank you, Catherine. So in terms of what we do now, we don't want plans to sit on a shelf. Historically, that's what some of these plans end up doing. That is not our goal here. Because they're heavily vetted, we know there are projects out there that have community support. So trying to figure out ways to implement them, and one one issue with these CBTPs is that because we hear about the projects and the issues from, you know, a senior at the senior center or someone at, you know, a festival in Antioch, they don't necessarily have the same level of priority at the city level. The cities are focused on their CIP, and a lot of these projects don't even make it into the CIP. So trying to find a way to, to really highlight these projects and move them towards implementability is important. And our last item, the coordinated call for projects, we think is a really prime opportunity to fund some of these projects, especially with the CARE funding category, which is basically earmarked for projects named in our CBTP. So any of those projects, not just that were on the last slide, but any listed at all in the CBTPs on the recommendations are eligible for that funding. So we will be hopefully moving at least a few projects from the CBTP towards implementation through CARE, as well as through TLC, which is especially another eligible funding source for a lot of these CBTP projects. We're also talking about the TEP. The TEP, will be kind of a catch-all for funding, a lot of these smaller active transportation safety projects. So getting them prioritized for the TEP is important. And then supporting CCTA's support to our local jurisdictions for their goals of getting these CBTP projects implemented. So working with them on identifying fund sources outside of CARE and TLC, and working with them, on letters of support and things like that to get these projects funded. That is our goal coming out of the CBTPs. How can we get these implemented? So that is really our presentation today. What we plan to do is bring this to the board later this month. And really that's to release the draft plan. We want to put it out there again for general public comment, and then finally adopt the plan later this summer. But that's our presentation. We can certainly take any questions, and I especially want to thank the participation of your local staffs, the community-based organizations, the residents that participated in all of our outreach activities, and to the consultant team for a lot of coordination. And I do just want to mention that when we did start our outreach, in terms of the in-person events, it happened to coincide with a lot of the immigration crackdowns. So because of these communities, that is why we shifted some of our activities to online, just to be cognizant of the fact that a lot of the people we were trying to reach were not leaving their homes at the time, especially right when we started our outreach activities. So just wanted to note that as well. So we feel like we still did a pretty good job of reaching these communities and working through the CBOs to reach these communities at a really kind of sensitive time for a lot of the target audiences. So with that, we can take any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Yes, Commissioner Meadows.
Thank you, Matt. On page 6 or slide 6. The chair wanted to know what all the colors meant and the areas. So we were talking. In East County, that big block out to the east, what is that supposed to represent something?
Yeah, so, well, we got asked the color question, I think, at every presentation we did, and they don't mean anything other than just identifying the 4 subregions, but the shapes themselves, those are census tracts. So MTC does their equity priority community identification at the census tract level, which are kind of big areas, like that big rectangular polygon or L-shaped polygon, kind of in the Brentwood area, or it's actually more Knightson kind of.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it's out in the farmland.
Yeah, it is. It's Knightson.
Okay.
And so the reason for that is, you know, well, the demographics in that census tract met MTC's criteria based on the factors that Catherine talked about, you know, income, vehicle ownership, ethnicity, things like that. So that is a different sort of area that pops up, but it has historically shown up, the Knightson area. But what we tried to do when we first started looking at these areas and talking to the TCC and other groups and county staff, we decided to expand the areas that we looked at, and the county suggested that there were some pockets around the county that might that aren't as big as the census tract, but are very small areas that might meet those demographics. So we tried to identify those smaller areas, you know, to include them in our plan. And actually, that's where the small areas in South County popped up, because as you probably know, there are no equity priority communities, at least by MTC's definition, in all of Southwest. But we did find some populations that met, you know, criteria. There's just not thousands of people. It's more like hundreds of people. So yeah, we did our best to try and make sure this met the demographics of Contra Costa County and not just MTC's definition.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, Vice Chair Meadows and Matt. Thank you. Any other questions anybody has? Yes,
Yeah.
Commissioner Armstrong.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Catherine. I had a related question, because when I first saw the presentation and it was talking about the EPCs, I'm thinking that's what the projects are going to reflect. But when you kind of get to one of those last slides where you list out the subregions, some of those look like projects that aren't necessarily tied to an EPC. They're just sort of general projects. So but in the introductory, you know, first slide or two, it really does focus on some of these equity priority areas. So it looks, you know, is the EPC the prime thing, but yet it's broader than that anyway, because, you know, not like you said, South County doesn't have a whole lot of EPC space in there.
So when we looked at, for example, CCTA's congestion management plan, we mapped all those projects and we identified, or we filtered those projects to look at those that were located within the EPCs, and then we had a half-mile buffer around each. But there were also projects that were identified during the engagement that weren't necessarily specific to a location in the EPCs, but that were identified by those communities as supportive, or things that they needed to be able to get to their destinations and their everyday services.
Yeah, so I'm not challenging any of the top-ranking projects. I think that all looks good, but I just wanted to kind of understand, is it truly EPC focused, or is there EPC and there's some other, you know, community-recommended projects too that could still apply here?
Yeah, and we also heard from residents of EPCs, they're trying to get to locations outside of their EPC. And so projects did come up that, you know, allowed them access to a BART station, which maybe wasn't inside the EPC. So access was a big portion of it, and then projects could kind of fall slightly outside of the EPC boundaries.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Carlson.
I'll just share that the EPCs in Plan Bay Area 2050 were even troubling for ABAC and MTC, because some areas came out that it didn't make sense that they came out, but they didn't quite meet the criteria based on, and then there were areas that were like, why is that in there? But again, when I look at this, like Knightson, it's a transportation desert in so many different ways. So applying maybe even our own criteria beyond is not necessarily a bad thing too. So thanks.
Thank you. And I had a question. I went through all the attachments. So how do you know, like, is there some document that has the cost per project? Because I didn't see that. Did I miss it?
No, we didn't do
So you haven't costed them out yet?
No.
Because, well, then how will you know? Yeah, I mean, when does that happen in this process?
Yeah, I mean, that's a project-by-project basis. This isn't a financial or a programming document. So yeah, it's more about as projects, if they apply for funding through OBAG, so there is cost available on these projects. We could, go through and pull out the costs, but it was more about, our criteria wasn't based on cost, it was more about the safety, access, and the implementability. So a higher cost project would have scored less on implementability.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I mean, this is a great list, but to your point, Matt, about this not sitting on a shelf collecting dust, at some point, like I'm just thinking about our own like CIP process with cities. And so I was just trying to figure out how do we go from the plan to actually doing these projects? So what is that step? I guess, yeah, if you could just help us understand that.
Yeah, getting these projects into city CIPs would be a great start. Because like I said, some of these just are, they're low-hanging fruit, but this maybe a city staff doesn't consider them a fully fledged
Right,
project.
So how does that happen? Like, are you talking with like the TAC? Like what is that process for at least presenting these for consideration by cities in the county?
Yeah, I think it's up to us to present these to city staff, and, understand that, the goal is to get them implemented and whether there's opportunities to incorporate them into their CIP. So that is something that CCTA can do as a follow-up to the plan.
Okay, yeah, I think that's important because we can all nod our head and say these are great, but then we need, they go on the shelf
Yeah.
and collect dust again. Okay.
I think we can add that to our kind of implementation plan.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? You've got okay, go
Well,
ahead,
no,
Commissioner
I
Armstrong.
would just say, I mean, if we're going to maybe look at getting these into local CIPs and things like that, we're all pretty much finishing up our budgets right now for the
Right.
year. So
Right.
we're really talking about, next year maybe kind of
Or
working
the
this
year
effort.
after.
So, but assume this is being talked about in the TCC level and with each of the jurisdictions and already, I mean, they're aware of these recommended proposed projects?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, it'd just be good, again, because like every city's cycle is different. So we just finished we haven't yet voted on it, but we're about to finalize our CIP budget for the next 2 years. So these would not make it. But I think the conversation should happen in the interim, right, to get the ball rolling for the future. So,
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're all in agreement. I won't talk that to death. Do we have any public comment, Terry Ann?
We have not received any public comment, written or verbal.
Okay, I'm going to close the public comment, bring it back to the board, and it looks like you would like a vote of approval for this plan. Is that correct? Is that the action being sought today?
Yeah, that is our recommendation to forward to the board for approval of the draft.
Okay, great. Is there a
So
motion?
moved.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Carlson. And
Second.
Commissioner Meadows, seconds. If you would please do a roll call vote, Terry Ann.
Commissioner Armstrong?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier?
Hi.
Vice Chair Meadows?
Yes.
Chair Obringer?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, wonderful. So this concludes our regular agenda items. The next item is correspondence and communications, and it doesn't look like we have any correspondence in the packet. So now moving to commissioner and staff comments. Anyone? I'm just going to make a really fast comment. We, as the City of Concord, signed the profit sharing agreement with the Navy so that we can move forward to the next phase of specific planning for the redevelopment of the former Concord Naval Weapons Station. So that has transportation implications. Really glad to hear that you're talking with Brookfield about that. So anybody else? Any other commissioner comments?
I'll just say I look forward to having some CCTA staff tomorrow at San Ramon Mayor's Breakfast, and we're going to talk about transportation things going on that affect our San Ramon residents, as well as use it as a listening session opportunity for the TEP.
Oh, that sounds great. Okay, staff comments.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, and likewise, welcome the opportunity to come speak where you're all at. about to talk about, as you know, with the TEP, we're in the current listening phase. So any opportunity we can get out there and, engage with your respective communities is very helpful. I just wanted to note, Redefine Mobility Summit, we've got, a great program that is all set up, and actually Concord is hosting this year. But we do have a great program. We're going to have a welcome reception on Monday night, which you're all invited to. And then the program itself actually will have a demo zone at Buchanan Airport where we will feature some actual air mobility partners, particularly Joby. So it's going to be a really exciting opportunity to kind of see some of the future transportation options. And we also invited you all to the kind of the VIP demo day on Wednesday if you're available. And I also wanted to mention that we were invited to the California Transportation Commission meeting on June 25th to talk about autonomous vehicles in public transportation. They're doing a innovation series right now. The last meeting they had Aurora come to the meeting, which is autonomous in freight. And they invited CCTA to come talk about particularly autonomous in public transit and public transportation. And this is really to promote, the DMV back in April adopted their new commercial heavy-duty AV regulations. And just so you know, CCTA was a big part of that. We actually were able to get some changes in the regulations to support autonomous vehicles within the public transit space because a bus is a heavy-duty vehicle. And so we were able to work really closely with other public transit agencies to support that change. And so we're excited to be part of that to help promote DMV's new regulations and be part of the conversation at CTC. So those are kind of the two big announcements that are coming up in the next couple of weeks, and I'm sure I'll have more at the board meeting for you all.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we covered that under other business. And so I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 3:27. Thank you all.
Recording stopped.